This episode is brought to you by Cobot, a leading management software for co-working spaces, office hubs, and flexible workspaces around the world. You know, one of the best things about Cobot is that it is produced by people who manage a co-working space and know the ins and outs of the main problems and issues bugging co-working managers. So if you want more time for your coworkers and community, check out Cobot at cobot.me and take your co-working management to the next level.
So with that, I'm very proud to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to ask you to also give a little wave so that we can identify you. Marc Navarro. Marc is a co-working and organization consultant and the content director of the Co-working Spain conference. He is also chief curator at Co-working Academy at CU Asia and an advisor at the LATAM Co-working Summit. Marc created the first co-working with social return space, Synergex, and was director of the first Utopicus co-working in Barcelona. He collaborates with us here at Cobot and is frequently featured on our blog in both English and Spanish.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Caterina Maiolini. Kate is the London Mayor of Startup Home, a social enterprise co-living in Islington. She is also the UK ambassador and head of ambassadors for Co-Liv, the largest non-profit association of co-living professionals. She has a background in fashion and finance and, of course, real estate. She's a podcaster, educator, community facilitator, and we're really excited that she'll be sharing her deep knowledge of the co-living sector with us today. Yann Heurtaux. Yann is a freelancer by necessity since 2010. Yann discovered co-working at Beta Co-work in 2012 in Brussels and attended and contributed to his first Co-working Europe conference the next year, the following year, in Barcelona. He's currently the co-auditor of Coworking Switzerland's accounts and a proud member of both Co-Spire.work and Powerhouse in Lausanne, Switzerland, where he hacks and makes sustainable mobility happen at scale more quickly with others via cargo.bike.
Hi there. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you. And Maria Calafatis. Maria is the co-founder at the Cube Athens workspace. The Cube has been operating since 2013 and is Athens' largest co-working community and host to most of Athens' technology events, hackathons, and training events. She is a member of the Startup Weekend Global Facilitation Team and has been involved with the Startup Weekend since 2009, having facilitated over 20 events through the platform. Her first business was founded at a Startup Weekend too. So thank you all for joining us. I'm incredibly excited to get going. So I'm going to start by throwing out the first point, which is that freelance occupancy has changed and how co-working spaces, how they responded to that. Marc, would you like to be our first to field that?
Oh, yeah, sure. It's a difficult question because for sure there are, different spaces and different markets and different behaviors. But generally what we saw is that freelancers are the most flexible kind of clients you may have, right? Because they can take their own decisions and they take them really fast. So what we saw is that in some markets, and especially with those spaces which the spaces can't or didn't want to be flexible with their members, they have huge cancellations of their memberships. I said they couldn't or they didn't want to because some people, the managers just can't afford to give big discounts or have policies like that to have their members, and others just didn't want. At the end, the freelancers were trying to save money. And on the other hand, they have to take care of their children if they have, because as the schools were closed in most countries, someone has to be at home taking care of the children. And in some cases, if the couple is, a third-party employee and a freelancer, sadly, sometimes the freelancer takes more burden because it's more flexible depending on the attitude of the company of her partner. So yeah, that's I think a good summary on the situation.
Mm-hmm. And then, Maria, when we spoke, the situation was also quite different in Greece. Do you want to speak about that?
So, hi, everybody, and hello from Greece. Co-working has definitely changed a lot in Athens, in Greece. We've got a huge community of freelancers and digital nomads who are coming by. A lot of them are trying to avoid the cold, and at the same time, the measurements and the restrictions with COVID back home. We know those things are quite tough in places like the UK, Germany, and the US. But one thing that we have seen, and this is something that we discussed the other day at the Cool Madi, is the situation has also brought back a lot of the Greeks, a lot of what we call the brain drain, who initially had come to Athens for a summer break. Because of the situation and allowing people to work remote, a lot of the Greeks have now decided to continue working from their home base, which makes a lot of sense. And at the same time, Greece is an attractive place and the weather is still good, still warm, where digital nomads and freelancers want to come by and visit. And there's a lot to do and see, not only in the mainland, but also on the Greek islands.
Yes, it's interesting to see how in different contexts, it's the kind of regular members have changed, but also there's been new members coming in, which is really interesting and important to see. So I wanted to ask, have the needs of freelancers been more acutely exposed or accommodated as a result of these shifts?
I mean, I would say, is that for me, Madi?
Sure, please.
Yeah, okay. I would say, being one of the co-founders at the Cube, and everyone who's involved with co-working knows this, that the community of freelancers and digital nomads is a community that exists and has been existing for quite some time now. It's still very new for Greece. The co-living, which Kate will tell us more about too, is something that is completely new to Greece. It's something that we're also seeing arise. But on the other hand, crises bring opportunities, and it's crises like this that also give everybody the opportunity to see and to embrace change and a new kind of activity. And I'm really looking forward for the outcome. I mean, as Marc also mentioned, the freelancers and the digital nomads in general, they're more adaptable and they're more adjustable because you're already in that kind of mentality and mood, while people who were forced to work from home because due to the lockdown, we weren't working remotely. We're working from home. We're working from a lockdown. There's a huge difference to compare the one with the other.
Yeah, this is an important distinction. Thank you for making that. And I saw, Yann, you had something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe to connect with what specifically Marc was saying at the beginning. Maybe some of you are familiar with the DeskMag study each year. Carsten is gathering this and analyzing this for the whole community. You can find it online if you want a comprehensive. It's for sale, but you can have a snapshot every year around November. The demographics changed a lot for the past 5 years, at least in Switzerland. I'm not sure if it's applicable to other countries, but here we see more remote workers. Some of them who didn't really choose neither to work remotely from the company or even the space they are allowed to be working from. So that's terribly different from freelancers choosing their communities, the people they want to join or not. And it changed, here, at least in Switzerland, it changed a lot how operators responded to needs. Because here we see those remote workers, corporate remote workers, becoming the majority of the co-workers, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's also a point to be made for distinguishing all the terms that we use to refer to people who make use of these spaces. So independent workers, freelancers, remote workers. I wonder if anyone could say something about how, if there's a trend to move towards one way of speaking about the concerns, and if people who identify with these different categories have different needs.
Depending, I mean, yeah, these people have really different needs, and especially, for example, talking before the pandemic and after the pandemic, all profiles make much more use of private spaces like phone booths or meeting rooms, because the amount of physical contact it's reduced. So everybody's on the phone, on Skype, on Zoom or whatever, Google Meets. This for all. Regarding the different kinds of needs is what Yann was pointing, that a lot of people just don't choose the space, so they have much less engagement with the community in the space because they just don't care. And if there's something which is aligned to their taste or what they like, they do it, but it's in some sort, it's like by accident because they didn't choose to be there. So yeah, it's much different. On the other hand, you have amazing employees that work for third parties and are really involved, and it's even better because they are not freelancing, so they can use time without losing income. So if they have a good relationship with the company and they can do it on a nice way, they can participate on that. Usually the company employees make much more use of meeting rooms. Especially you need have good facilities because they want a space that represents them. This again with COVID changed because people is not visiting. So maybe a space that was not at the beginning before the pandemic a suitable space because it does not match for example, the exterior part of the building is not nice and it was not acceptable, but the inside facilities are really good. Now that space may work. So I mean, there are different details. The freelancers, for sure, are looking for a community, for a space which people that is similar to them, so they can share, they can learn, they can thrive at the end. And company employees, it's more about perks. Companies are much more worried about security. All this kind of stuff. So it's the two different worlds.
Yeah. So I'm very curious to understand how visions for co-working business models going forward will change. But I wanted to get a perspective from Kate into how has occupancy changed in the co-living sector?
So when I think about how co-working has changed, from my humble opinion, of course, is that for me, what I used to see is that I used to see co-working back in the days and use co-working just as a space where I could work from. And that is it. So literally just an office, a big space where I could go there and work from. Whilst slowly became a place where I also work from. So it's a place where I find my community, a place where I find the great energy, a space that I like and everything else. And within all of that, I also work from. So what Marc said is very relevant within co-living as well, where because of everybody has had to work from home. So you had to find yourself some space where you could also be by yourself and not just in your room. Like, for example, in our setup, we have 5 different breakout areas. 3 of them are kitchens and they are quite large. So we put some tables in so people can also work from there, run their working days from there, but having some privacy if they need to, just by shutting the door. And we put just something with written meeting in progress. We also have a rooftop. If anyone has been to one of my events before, you might have seen me dialing in for my rooftop, which was a saver. But what I think will change in co-living, but also in co-working, is that the more we go forward, the more it will be even more community focused. It will be much more focused on well-being, with more breakout areas where you can be on your own, where you can just get some space and clear your head. We've seen more requests in regard to co-living and spaces where you live and work together, on lightings, different type of lightings, color that surround you, a lot of implementation on IoT, of Internet of Things. People want to see less corporate environment, but more personal touch, especially if they have to spend 3 or 4 months in a place and not be able to move. They really want to feel like it's their home. It's more cozy, if that makes sense, instead of more like old school corporate. Yeah, that's what I see a lot. With regard to my guys in Co-living, to my members, it's also very important, the location, as in how far is a co-living place from the co-working space and vice versa. So obviously we are a co-living operator. We don't have a co-working space within our building as such. We've got a nice big living room where you can work from. Most of the rooms are set up with a nice desk and an office chair where you can work from. So you can run your calls, you can do whatever you need to. As I mentioned before, few different breakout space. But also we live in an area in London, which is Islington, for anyone that knows London quite well. And there's quite a few co-working spaces around. So what we decided to do was actually to collaborate with co-working spaces, as Bernie, who is on the call as well, and he runs the London Co-working Assembly, knows. I strongly believe in the collaboration between the two sectors, which eventually will merge into one, instead of one place having everything. So it's nice for, people who are in the co-working to actually step out and walk to their co-living, and vice versa. So people who are in the co-living to step out and walk or cycle or anything to their co-working, to bring together different type of communities as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for shedding light on how you expect co-living to change. And I'm wondering, in terms of co-working spaces, based on what you've understood over the last 8 months, new needs and the changing profiles of people in your spaces, how do you think that co-working spaces are going to readjust the vision that they had, the future business vision, so to speak? How does it look different now than it looked in the beginning of the year?
I think that's a question for you, co-working, more than me.
You asked earlier about the business model. One of the main questions here locally, let's say in Lausanne, we have between members, activists, operators, the demographics that needs co-working the most, that is the most lonely at the moment, are the freelancers who can't at the moment afford a co-working space or a desk. So one of the main challenge is, apart from the COVID situation here in Switzerland is aggravating quite quickly, but apart from the open to the public space problem, people need to gather and get some human link, and they can't afford the commercial part of it anymore. Mm-hmm. So one of the biggest challenges is keep opening moments, even small moments. Bernie is the founder of the Right Club initiative, and we do that too. Yesterday, I reconnected with a freelancer. He couldn't afford co-working anymore. He came to the Right Club and he could co-work for 2 hours, and it changed his week. So yeah, it's not even business model. It's more, okay, it's difficult for anyone. It won't change your revenue in the end, but is it worth doing a bit more effort? Yes, it is, because freelancers totally need that. So if you can open a window for those people in need, yes, please do it. It changed their lives more than work a lot.
I remember when we spoke, you also mentioned in private business, it's quite possible to facilitate a subsidy model. And I wonder if you would describe that a little bit. Would you describe it, Yann?
Oh, yeah. One of the most vibrant community here we have in the co-working movement in Lausanne is Powerhouse, run by the Power Coders movement. So you can find them online, powercoders.org. They do a code bootcamp, learning to code software for refugees. And then they did a house to do that. So they opened a Powerhouse. And actually you can buy a desk, a meeting room, or anything for you. And you can buy something from someone else. You don't decide. You pay for 2 rooms, 2 desks. You might use one, you might offer one. And the second one, it's the community hosts that give it to someone needing it. If they come across the door and ask for it, some of them are available and you can co-work for free.
Can I add something if you want?
Please.
I think that in the mid and long term, it will be better for co-working spaces because the future is uncertain. right? It's like we don't know what's going to happen. So, we know what's going to happen. We don't know how bumpy it will be the road and how fast or slow we will get there. So the problem is that if you are asked to sign a 5 years office contract, you can sign that. You don't know how you will be in 5 weeks. So co-working will thrive in this kind of environment. So the companies and some people that know co-working really well, because they are my friends and I'm all the time talking about co-working, they were like, no, co-working is not for us. And both of them approached at the beginning of this crisis asking about co-working, and it's saying yes. So it happens also to you. So a lot of people come closer to you asking, hey, maybe this works. Maybe I'm, rebuilding my company. We will work in a different way. So co-working, it will, become something which now is appealing, and at the beginning it was not. So that's good for us. For sure, that has a good side and a bad side, because if things goes really well, really bad, we will have to be really flexible. And this is what happened at the beginning of the crisis. On the other hand, some companies are going to implement what's a strategy that they are saying it's a hub and spoke policy with a smaller headquarters and like satellite, I don't know if you say that in English, satellite locations. So there are smaller offices. And for me, it's quite silly to start creating a lot of offices around. So it's much easier to just have an agreement with different co-working spaces. So your workforce, it's working closer to their homes. So commuting is reduced, and potentially you can get rid of public transportation. So allowing that people who really need public transportation use it, and keeping your employees safer. So this takes us also to what was a good location before COVID. It means something different than what's now a good location. So we are seeing in some regions where, for example, public transportation is not as good as in Europe, in which the co-working spaces which are thriving are the ones which are not in the city centers, in the really fancy areas, but in the outskirts, closer to the homes of company employees, because then it's really easy to set a group of people working there. Because on the other hand, companies have to restructure the way they work, because it's not that you can set your accountancy department in a co-working space or another. It's depending on where people live, if you want that this makes sense. So I think that in the mid and long term, it will be better, and we will see much more people from companies going independently, not as a pack to work in a co-working space, because they will be looking for spaces closer to their homes.
And on the question of mid to long term, Maria, when we spoke, you mentioned that there have been policy adjustments to encourage to encourage entrepreneurial training in schools. And I wonder if you have some thoughts about what this could mean for the future of the co-working industry on a regional level in the short and in the medium and long term.
If I could just jump in here just to after Marc's remark, one thing we also realized, as far as the co-working and the startups and the full-time members and the full-time startups in the space, talking about Athens now and the Cube, we saw a huge gap since COVID. And we also saw, and I'm sure that a lot of people saw this too, we had a lot of teams that packed up, ended up working from home. It was tough times. Budget was a problem. But on the other hand, again, as Marc mentioned, it's not only the community of freelancers and digital nomads, but also the community of individuals, because there's a lot of people working out there for big companies, for big projects, for big VCs who've now been told, you need to work remote, you need to work from home. Let's not forget that we are all human beings and we all have the necessity to belong. And we need this everyday engagement. And people do seek these kind of communities. Virtual is very cool, but you don't always get the whole experience and the whole atmosphere as you do if it would be a physical space. One thing that we've also, the restrictions in Athens now is we're not allowed to host an event for more than 9 people. So what we are doing for the co-working community is once a week, we announce networking and beers at the Cube right after work. So it's very under the radar. We're protecting and going by the measurements, but at the same time, we're providing a community and a network of the community that comes in. So it's a very kind of last minute and surprise. We'll say it in the morning or lunchtime when we see it's a busy day in the space and say, don't forget about 7:00, we're shutting down the internet, join us for beers on the terrace or on the veranda. So this also brings great opportunity for collaborations, for networking, and just for people to meet and mingle between them. Because again, I think Marc mentioned it, that when you're a freelancer, it's very difficult. And also digital nomad, the fact you're always on the move and you're always on the go. It's also very important that when you stop somewhere, as Kate mentioned, you want to connect, you want to meet the locals, you want to know what's happening, you want to, where you're going to end up next. And going back very quickly to your question, we have had a couple of some great initiatives locally from the Greek government, where everything has very quickly shifted to a digital side of things. We all know that Greece is a country with a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of borders to set up a business, to get started, to get off the ground. Things are getting easier, but baby steps. This is not a problem that only Greece faces, but it's a common problem that we see globally. Some countries, some governments easier than others. But again, I do believe and I do see that after COVID, there will be a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity. Let's not forget that most of the creativity and innovation usually comes outside of times of crisis. So really looking forward, and I'm sure that everybody on this call, whether you're connected to the co-working or the co-living community, the fact that we get to meet so many cool people and cool projects, and we get to cross paths and meet and learn and take and give is an amazing experience on its own. But I'd like to hear everybody else's opinion here too. Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you. Is someone itching to respond, Kate?
I mean, what can I say? Do you want me to start to talk about the Italian bureaucracy? I'm happy. If we have 10 hours, I can just go through that. Marc, you're laughing. I don't think in Spain you're much better.
No. I was laughing because I think it's a problem.
Yeah,
more or less everywhere. But yeah, we are the worst. So
the three of us can cry together. No, I agree. I mean, what really struck me there, Maria, was two things that you said. One, the belonging, which I think is something that we will see coming up more and more. So as I was mentioning before, I think people are going to look into more niche, into their co-living spaces, but also into their co-working spaces. There's a lot of tech, which I think maybe we can chat about it as well if we want to, that will help with that. A lot of the platform where now you can book spaces to be co-working and co-living spaces as well, also let you see who is actually in the space right now. So people will, I think they will steer from just being like, well, I just want to be in London to I want to be living with that sort of community and I want to be working with that sort of community. And then they will kind of like decide if they also like the area or not. But I think also because there will be even more and more people starting to travel and live the digital nomad life or freelancer or remote worker, however you want to define it, this will happen more and more. I heard a lot of my friends that used to be working, what you were saying before, of the fact that the difference between freelancer who've been doing this life before and people that have been forced to work remotely. I can see in this month, a lot of people have really switched. They first said like, oh, I hate working from home and I don't want to be close in my house anymore, to starting to join different type of community, house swapping, co-living places, looking at what sort of co-working they could find in the place where they go, wanted to go and explore more things. So I think we are going to see a massive shift of that. But the belonging is something where people will still want to really focus in a co-working, in a co-living, in any environment. Belonging is such a good thing. And on a side note, absolutely love the idea of switching off the internet, Maria, for events. Brilliant. Really brilliant.
So we got a question in the chat, which I'd like to bring up and also refer back to Yann's point. I know that you were speaking from an economic standpoint of the capacities that freelancers have to gain access to these communities and to participate in co-working spaces. And I wonder if we could speak about inclusion in broader terms.
So belonging and premium are really interesting terms, actually. Yeah. So far, I'm pretty proud because the two spaces I'm a member of, as a white male, like boring, one is co-owned by a black woman here in Lausanne, and the other ones, as I said, they are the home of the refugees wanting to get their way better by learning to code and meeting. I mean, it sometimes it's also just the first step to have a first network of people wanting to help them, software developer or not. Actually, some of them learn to code, some of them just discover their first connections, first people they meet. Premium, to be honest, for me, the premium part of co-working or communities more globally, it's access. You're either in or out. You're a member. It's a private club or not. Mm-hmm. Being a member, that's what is premium. Being allowed in. It's not about having access to the space 24/7. It's not, do you have the fanciest private office in the building or in the space? Are you a member? Do you belong? Or do you have the key, or do you have the trust of the other people? Mm-hmm. And business model-wise, it shouldn't be the most expensive part of the membership. It should be the first tier, but that's the premium part. It's not only about, do you work from this space or do you belong and can you interact with the others? Because again, those needing it most are those who either lost their revenue or didn't have one at the beginning of the last crisis. So include people, make the premium tier the first tier, like being able to belong, the less expensive.
Kate, you look like you want to add something.
Yes, because I just read on the chat the comment that Janine made. And for non-disclosure, I would like to say I love Janine very much. So I think she always raises really good points. So if you haven't read it yet, she just said, I'm worried about belonging, becoming the next culture fit and exclude to exclude. I'd like to say from a co-living point of view, I understand what you mean, Janine. But I also think that it's very important for people to really feel like they belong in a space, which doesn't mean everybody around them needs to be exactly the same or other people cannot join in. But I see the example of Startup Home, where we tend to have people who are entrepreneur, freelancer, and start-upper, because that's the sort of mentality. What that means is that on a Saturday night, instead of, sitting down, watching maybe a movie and having some beers, we might be all upstairs in the communal area working, coding, speaking to each other, masterminding what we want to do. So I am very happy to welcome anybody. So not everybody who is in Startup Home right now is an entrepreneur or a freelancer. Well, as a freelancer, because everybody has to work from home, but on a different level. But some people are very interested in joining this sort of environment, and they fit in very well and they want to be with us. And I'm very happy to open that to everybody. But I also think that it's very nice to feel like, you belong in here, because you can always bounce idea with other people. There is someone in your same industry. You feel like, in a sort of way, people around you get you. Does that make sense? And I think that this is the sort of thing that we will see happening in a lot of co-working spaces as well. When I was participating to some of the London co-working assembly, when we were doing still the physical meetups, I remember that there were a couple of spaces, like, for example, one in London is called the Halley, and is a co-working space which is in East London and is a very artistic music and, arty, crafty area. So they actually open a co-working space with like a music studio, a creative suite, So you will have that sort of vibe going around you. And you could be someone who likes to code and is developing a software, but you feel like you want to belong in that sort of space. I hope that replied to you a little bit, Janine. Okay. Anyway, that's what I want to say. I don't know what you guys think about it, but yeah.
I hope that we hear more from Janine in the chat. I'm going to go to another question from the chat. How can co-working sustainably become even more accessible to freelancers, many of whom may not be able to afford premium spaces or would have never chosen freelancing as a career were it not for the crisis? Yann, do you have a response for that?
I mean, if I had cracked that already, I would be happy to share. There are several ways that works better than others. In my experience, corporate remote workers are maybe in a position to sponsor some freelance discounts. That should be a discussion with if you're an operator, with your customers, like talent hunting wise, or image wise. Do you want to be the company that just consume what is available, that is space, a community, or do you want to be seen as the people sponsoring access to others? Because at some point, those freelancers who lost all their revenue, they might be your next employees, your next co-founders. So you have a personal, private, deep interest to let them in and to help finance sustainably the business model that will allow that. That's one first answer. Talk to your local authorities. Bother your mayors, bother all the elected officials. Bother them. Every week, talk about that. Access to entrepreneurship, that's fancy on a political program. What are those people actually doing to make that happening? That's the two ways that works, at least a bit.
When we had a call previously, you spoke a little bit about your experience of approaching councils or collaborating with others who had done it, especially to secure working space from underutilized structures. Could you share a bit more about that experience? Because from here, I think it would be interesting to say, so we've looked at the possibility in private ownership models to subsidize. And I think that this is a nice segue into thinking about how policy could change, the role that policymakers could play, and how co-working and co-living spaces can activate those conversations.
Who did you ask specifically?
If you could share a bit more about your experience of, you spoke about approaching councils to get access to underutilized space.
Sorry about that. The thing is, people need spaces together and work from, and do way more things than just work. I mean, most of the time, co-workers, co-working operators, freelancers that desperately need a space and an affordable one, they are aligned with people doing music, people doing, when it's possible, events, cultural ones. You need to talk to your city council as a group of people, not just you. Oh, I would love to have some free rent to open a co-working space. That's cute, but that won't work. Most of the time, there are several festival events, associations. They need a space for 2 months a year. So, I mean, the old school way, I'm sorry to be the old fart here, but gather your community needing a space before getting a space. And once you're a big enough group needing that, go to the power and place that can help you or might help you, because that's their mission. I mean, you're in the city, you're contributing. They are there to help you if you have a solid case and you are a big group enough.
Mm-hmm. And to go back to Maria, I wanted to ask, in terms of changing policy to encourage entrepreneurship from a younger age in Greece, it means a future generation of entrepreneurs. And I think that there's frequently they work individually, so they are part of the individual worker, freelancer. Their culture of work is quite similar to that. And do you see any ways in which policy in Greece is going to pinpoint co-working as an infrastructure for that? Do you see anything developing in that direction?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the Greek government, I think we discussed this in our call the other day, the Greek government has now announced that entrepreneurship is a topic that will be taught also into local Greek schools, which is a big step forward. I really believe, and I guess that everybody on the school and everybody in general would agree, the younger they start, the younger we start, the better it is. I mean, we as a Cube, and both myself and my partner Stavros, we are partners both in the business and in life. And our two kids, I mean, we see the kind of education they go through, and the system in Greece is, the mentality is you get what you get what you pay for. And I think that's a very wrong way to go about it. And, you shouldn't, you do get talent in state school too, and you should give the opportunity for young entrepreneurs, or we did a lot with the refugee crisis. Again, we saw a lot of talent there. Entrepreneurship, education, innovation is a program that should be open and available, open source for everyone and everyone. And the younger, the better. Now, as a Cube, we do run a lot of programs and summer camps and throughout Christmas and Easter, all this before COVID, where we're running weekly programs on entrepreneurship, on coding, on Arduino, Raspberry Pi, and so on. There's a lot of interest in the community and in the parents. We've actually done hackathons, mini hackathons for kids, for teenagers and up, and even young ages. The best ages are usually 8 and up. When they have an idea what school is like, they're focused enough to sit in a chair and start learning team building activities and can focus, and their creativity is just amazing, especially if you leave them and you guide them, but at the same time you let them express themselves. The outcome is va-va-voom. And we need to impose and act more into those kind of initiatives. And I'm sure that in all communities, and if you can't, as Yann said, if you can't attract the municipalities immediately, start attracting a local community, start attracting a school, start attracting a group of parents. It's about building a community around that. And usually it's more difficult to attract the government or the schools from day one, but start with something smaller, the same way we do with the business, and work our way up. And we'll get there for sure.
Mm-hmm. I just want to share something of my own experience. So we started a very small co-working space in Johannesburg. And when we struggled to make contact with adults who were looking for places to work, it was their children who were already coming and curious about the fact that we had bicycles or that we were making lunches, and they were the ones who brought their parents. So they are a very big part of the community that we absolutely should not neglect to encourage them to stay involved and to be involved. Yeah, they're essential, actually. Marc,
you said bicycles. That's the magic word.
Yeah, that was it. Marc, I wonder if you could share some perspectives on how policy is changing, if it is in Spain, from your perspective, to encourage, or what co-working spaces are doing with that, for that, if they've been made mention of.
We are really bad in working together. I mean, we have a strong WhatsApp group sharing, what's going on. But as maybe Italy and Greece, I don't know if it's the same, but talking with the government, it's difficult sometimes. I worked for them time ago. So I know how they think, and it's just that they have a different mindset, the people who are working for the government and the politicians, for sure. And indeed, as you mentioned in the introduction, I created Synergics. I invented the concept, co-working with social return. And let's say they are really attached to cutting the inauguration band. They love making new buildings, new facilities, this kind of thing. And they are sometimes not all the time struggling with working with private parties. They have a lot of regulations trying to block that because that can lead to abuse. But those regulations made to avoid the abuse makes that they have difficulties for innovating and working with this. So as co-working spaces, there was like 6 years ago, there was an association in Spain that tried to work with the government, and it was very difficult for us because at the end, co-working is a very fractal world. You have dozens of spaces with completely different needs, the small ones, big ones, in the cities, in the fields. So everybody has their own needs and their own wars. So everybody just focused on what's the most important for them, and it was difficult. I know this is not very, inspiring, but at least is my experience. I don't know if it will be other people in Spain, but what I felt is that we have been really bad working together, which is so wrong because we try to empower our members to work together. So at the end, the spaces work together in city bases, but mainly with the people which you have trust, and the people you maybe at some point you have a problem, you call them, they call you. How do you tackle this situation? Do you have experience in this? They are not. We are as co-working, we are not working on that. There's another association, but it's more related with business centers, which is more. It's working on policy and this kind of stuff, but with a different perspective. It's more like a real estate perspective. That at some point it can be good for co-working spaces, but usually the scope and the worries of these spaces are much different than the co-working independent, especially the independent co-working spaces.
Mm-hmm. Kate, I'm curious about how co-living factors into approaches to policy or the possibility to approach local councillors. It's definitely more... Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, sure. So what's happening I cannot say what's happening everywhere around the world. I can tell you Italy and UK, especially in UK, because I've been here for a long time. I can tell you that in the UK, until in England, especially more the UK, England, until maybe last year, everybody was kind of like very wary of coliving, of what it was all about, etc. And in the past 5-6 months, a lot of the local authorities and council around the countries have been supporting coliving. So, there's been like a fantastic, just recently, there's been 3 fantastic schemes alone that have been approved. One was approved just a few days ago, and that's 200 rooms in southwest London. And that was approved through planning permission in collaboration with the council. The same thing happened for one of the co-living schemes in Birmingham, which was actually supported by the whole Birmingham Council. We're going to have the collective opening another one, which is about 310 rooms again in an area of London. And there's another one in Manchester, which was sailed through the planning and was really supported by the local authorities for about 45-story building with roughly about 2,000 units. So we are talking about like a massive development. I think that, I'm obviously part of Co-Liv as well, which is a global association, but I'm also looking to expand on a more local association. So I definitely think that, an industry body that really works very hard for what is happening locally and not just globally, because what happens in UK is different than Spain, is different than Greece, is different than Italy, is different than anywhere else. Just really locally, they really understand rules and regulation and needs of people. They could be freelancer, remote worker, entrepreneurs, people that are forced to work from home, and that really fights in a sort of way for making us heard. It's very important, and it works in both ways. I collaborate a lot with the UK Assembly, the Co-working Assembly. I think they are doing a fantastic job. I know they had some meeting like with the GLA as well, which is the London Authority, and they're tackling these sorts of problems moving forward. Startup Home was set up as a social enterprise also because of that reason, because we understood the importance of, as much as possible, keeping the price for co-living, in this case, because we do co-living, as affordable as possible so that everybody can afford this sort of experience. Because there's a lot of people that would love to, maybe stay in a co-living place, like some of the ones that are building right now, which are super cool, very trendy and everything. But the price is about 20% above market price, if not more, because of everything that they offer you. And not everybody is able to afford that. And it's the same thing with the co-working, right? There are so many co-working places which are super fancy, and they come in with a very high price tag that then push people away. And I think this is also why we've seen the insurging, of certain co-working spaces, which are not really co-working spaces, but which then become more affordable, and then people are able to do that.
Mm-hmm. So to come back to something that Yann and I spoke about previously, there's always this concern that if you create attractive places for people to work, especially when they haven't previously had access to that, by virtue of it being an attractive place, it runs the risk of becoming an object of gentrification or falling into circles similar to that. And I wonder if your discussions with council, and because of the high stakes of inclusion in living, how those conversations, how those are managed.
You should invite to another panel Magali and Colin, the one running Powerhouse. I'm sure they have a lot to say. Bernie did a podcast with them. You can find the link somewhere on the chat. The gentrification part, to be honest, I don't have a solution. The lowest common denominator we can have with real estaters is if you have a co-working community, the neighborhood price will go up by 2 figures in 5 to 10 years. That they understand. The social link, the city fabric, it's a bit harder. One thing I wanted to say about how it can go, or how you shouldn't maybe do it, something that doesn't work and is toxic for your local community. Don't accept subsidized salaries for your community hosts, for instance. Why? They will arrive way too much later. They will be late. You will maybe try to secure a job for someone, and you won't be able to pay them because the public money will arrive 1 year late, maybe. In Belgium, for instance, some communities and spaces almost closed down because of that. Like they were too trustful or thought it would arrive earlier. That could be really an issue. The best way to subsidize a co-working space, have public servants co-work from there. Be there once a week or every day of the week, working at the contact of the people, and just pay your membership. That's the best way to subsidize.
Mm-hmm. Maria, I see you nodding your head a lot. Please.
No, sorry. There's also different approach. I agree with that. It's nice, and there are some spaces in Spain that have that experience, having public servants working on the space. But on the other hand, for example, it was not, widely known, but the Barcelona City Council, for example, years ago, they subsidized co-working space. So they help members to pay for the membership, which was cool. So you have to meet certain conditions, but if you do, you can ask for a certain amount of money, which is cool. I wrote an article many years ago, which is not translated to English, which was Co-working Hybrid title. And the thing what I came up with, it was doing something like that. Why they have to build public co-working spaces if they can instead subsidize the members, not the spaces, so you don't lose your freedom. and they can make something like equal or based on the income of the people who needs that, because we know that co-working accelerates a project. It works. It makes entrepreneurs success earlier, so they can pay taxes earlier, pay more taxes. Everything goes better, much faster. So, I mean, it was so nice. But the problem is that at least here they are so attached to cutting the inauguration band that it's difficult for them to apply a system like this. But I think that works. The problem also with public subsidies and this kind of stuff is that sometimes it's not known by the users. So I came up with, because someone told me that was something which exists, and I was like, no way. I mean, I never heard about that, and then I start searching in the Barcelona City Council website, and I found it. So sometimes there are ways of getting help as entrepreneurs, but you are not aware of them, and that's a shame, because that money is lost. And maybe they are like, oh, this is not working, so we are not going to do it next year, right? So and indeed, I know people that works in policy that have that emphasize always that it's really important for public authorities to inform the citizen about the tools they have available to help themselves.
Maria, I'd like to come back to you.
Thank you, Madi. So I would say that both Yann and Marc made a very good point there. We haven't yet seen a lot from the Greek government as it comes to subsidies and support on entrepreneurship and co-working. I mean, our space is privately owned, and we started the first co-working space ever in Athens 10 years ago. And after that, it became a bit of a hype. And 10 of them popped up until the government decided to compete with all 10 of them. And instead of being there to support the community who knew what they were dealing with and how they were dealing, and they were close to the community, they competed. And that caused a lot of the private spaces to close and brought a bit of a friction, between the government and the policymakers, and between the public, the spaces that were run by public initiatives. And I agree with you there, Marc. It's very important that the message is put through well. And it's also very important when we learn how to collaborate, and when we can use the resources coming from the government to support, as we mentioned before, with the policymakers, with the government, with these kinds of initiatives on the legal side of things, to make the whole process a lot easier. But it's also, at the same time, it's very important to allow the local representatives and the local co-working communities to embrace and to support the entrepreneurship community, the startups, the innovators, because they're the ones who know better. So, it's good to allow each one to do their work in the field that they know better, but at the same time to come together and connect. This way we will both move forward a lot faster and a lot easier. That would be my point there.
Thank you so much for that. Does anyone have anything they want to add on? Any last thoughts? I'm a little bit sad we're reaching the end of our hour together.
Mm-hmm. I would say something here very quickly. As far as freelancers is concerned, and yes, we see this too. Sometimes freelancers, they don't have the budget, or people are struggling on how to even pay a membership. I mean, one thing that we do at the Cube, I mean, we all know this, again, being in the co-working community, it's about the win-win collaborations you get to build between projects and between people. And sometimes they're a lot better than a paid membership. I mean, we've had people come to us say, I'm a student, I'm living in Athens, I fall in love with a Greek girl. These are my skills, I'm studying, I don't have a budget at the moment to pay for a membership, but I can offer X, Y, Z. Can we find a middle way here? And we did. So, it's also, again, it's about, finding ways of how you can collaborate, and very cool projects come out of that. And again, being in the co-working and in the startup community, we know the struggles. We know that it's a roller coaster, but we also know that every day we wake up, we don't know who we're going to meet, what kind of people and projects. And the more flexible and the more viable we are and the more open-minded we are and thinking outside the box will allow more innovation and more projects and more cool things to come our way. So I would say, again, find ways. I mean, one rule we have at the Cube, we always say, we never say no. We say yes, but if we don't agree fully from the beginning, we say yes, but. So, come to us with a proposal and we'll definitely meet halfway. And this solves a lot of challenges and a lot of difficulties, and both parties end up happy at the end. So it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, Kate?
Maria, we are all moving to Athens, apparently.
Please do.
I mean, the fact that you never say no, for me, you've already sold me. So I'm coming. Yes, but I can take it.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful approach. It's something very similar to what we do at Startup Home as well. It's very difficult that we say no. We have started a long time ago to kind of like disrupt a little bit what the landlords did in London, as in the classical way of having to prove, income and, what do you do, what do you not do. Sometimes people just want to travel from one place to another. They have enough money. They are entrepreneurs. They don't have, they can't prove how much is their income every month or that sort of thing. So I think the more we're going to go forward, the more the yes, but will have to be the attitude that everybody will need to have: co-working, co-living, even working spaces or anything else. So yeah, I really like that. Bravo, Agape.
And of course, keep the space active and the community coming. I mean, people come to the co-working and to the co-living not because of the space or not because how sexy the space is. They can come for the people they're going to come and meet, for the community, and for the community managers there. And I think Yann wanted to add there.
And coffee.
And beer. Beer. We also have beer. We always have beer in our fridge. And whenever anyone comes through the space for the first time, we show them the kitchen. We say, so there's the coffee and there's always cold beer in the fridge. And they're like, so what? How does the beer work? Where do we pay? We're like, we don't. We always top up with beer. So, it's open to the community. But, make sure that whenever we're having an event or networking, everybody tops up with like 6 beers. And there's always a top up with beers in the fridge. So that's also a very cool tool to have, beers.
Thanks so much. That's great. Is there anything that anyone wants to contribute before we wrap up? I just want to say, excuse me, thank you so much to Marc, Kate, Maria, and Yann. It's been so great. And thank you so much for making the time to join us. Thank you to everybody.
Thanks to the Cobot team for inviting us and hosting this, please.
It's our pleasure, really. And thank you to everybody who joined and offered questions. I am really looking forward to sharing more information with you after the talk. And seeing how we can continue working with the content.
Can I say one thing? Just thank you very much for having me. I'm really happy. Thanks for listening to the co-living side of stuff and, for really understanding that both industries are merging. Thank you, Tilo. Your team is amazing. Their organization was fantastic. So well done to all of you guys. And if anyone wants to listen more of my voice tomorrow, there is the Co-living and Co-working conference, and I will be having a chat as well in there in a panel with 2 other amazing people. So, I hope to see you there as well. That's it.
Yeah, register. The speakers lineup is amazing.
Well, of course. Hello. But yeah, thank you very much. Really, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. It's really been great. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye and wish you all a great evening. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. And thank you so much also to Bernie and all the folks at Efweek who've supported us and also been able to host us.
Thank you, Maddie, for hosting this.
Yes, well done, Maddie. A round of applause to you.
Thanks so much,
That's
all
so
of
generous.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Nice seeing everyone.
Take care, everyone.
See you
You hang
tomorrow.
up first. You hang up
tomorrow.
first. Great job. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
It's like the CCCCC Belgrade, but online, Bernie. That's how it
It
felt
is.
like, right? I was like, wow! It's like
Tilo was there too, wasn't
he? Yeah, it's like there's Tilo and there's Janine and there's Bernie and there's everybody else. So yeah. Really cool.
Maddie, this is going to be a podcast now. This is really good. So me and Zelko are going to take a week off and just post this. Okay, we're gonna have to edit out Navarro, but we'll work away.
All right, I'm gonna kick you all out now so we can all go to bed. But have a good one, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.